gender affirming care and trans ideology being pushed on impressionable children.
She was once the face of hope, a brave teenager on TV who broke barriers and inspired millions. But what happened after I Am Jazz went off the air? The answer isn't what you think. Jazz Jennings, once full of dreams and energy, is now facing battles no one saw coming. Her smile has faded. Her spirit seems dimmer. And her reality is far from the life she fought so hard for. From emotional breakdowns to crushing pressure, everything has changed. This isn't just a fall from fame. This is the part of her life no one wanted to see. The untold struggles of Jazz Jennings. Gender confirmation surgery. Jazz Jennings became famous for transitioning at a young age. She received praise from doctors, press coverage, and invitations to speak at events. She was admired for her courage and confidence. However, behind the public image was a struggle with surgeries and emotional wounds that were unexpected. In 2018, Jazz achieved a significant milestone by having gender confirmation surgery. This surgery was a crucial step in her journey as a transgender person. Many in the transgender community viewed this surgery as a major breakthrough, and Jazz had also longed for this moment. Supporters considered it a triumph to be celebrated. However, complications arose soon after the surgery. Jazz started taking puberty blockers at a young age as part of her transition process to make things easier and prevent the growth of male characteristics she did not want. However, a side effect of this was that her body did not develop enough penile tissue wanted for gender confirmation surgery to create a vaginal canal. This mandated her surgeons to devise a different strategy. They opted to take skin from her stomach to assist with the procedure. It was a complex decision that carried risks and mandated precision. Unfortunately, the operation did not go as planned. Shortly after the surgery, Jazz faced serious complications, including swelling, persistent pain, and difficulties with healing. The surgery, intended to be the last stage of her journey, turned out to be just the start of a much more painful experience. Jazz underwent multiple surgeries, not just one. Doctors attempted to address complications from previous procedures each time. However, the more surgery she had, the more difficult it was on both her body and mind. She felt tired and overwhelmed by the immense pressure she was under, not only physically recovering, but also dealing with public scrutiny. Many people saw her on TV. Her show I Am Jazz always portrayed her as happy, self-assured, and lively. However, now viewers saw a different side of her. During intimate moments and personal interviews, Jazz spoke openly. She admitted to feeling like something inside her had shifted. She no longer felt like her true self. She felt numb and sometimes even empty. These instances uncovered a reality that had not been previously acknowledged by many. Jazz's story started with hope and pride, but eventually turned into a cautionary tale. It serves as a reminder that even well-intentioned medical decisions can have unforeseen consequences. Her journey was supposed to be inspirational, but it also raised some important concerns. People questioned if she was too young for such a major surgery, if there were adequate long-term studies on the results, and if doctors could have done more to prevent complications. Over time, the toll of her experiences started to become evident in Jazz's appearance. She was not only seen as a strong and transformative figure anymore. Instead, she was now seen as someone attempting to recover and comprehend what she had endured. Her physical appearance had changed, and her emotions had been severely tested. The once supportive world now quietly observed as she attempted to rebuild her life. She was not only recovering from surgeries, but also from the pressure of high expectations placed on her. The constant attention from cameras and interviews added to the challenge she was already facing. Jazz had to deal with physical and emotional pain while also being seen as a role model, which was overwhelming for someone so young. Her story is still impactful. It's not because everything went smoothly, but because it did not. It demonstrates that gender transition is a deeply personal and often challenging process. Each journey is unique, and even in successful outcomes, there may be hidden personal battles. In the end, Jazz is still standing. She is still making an effort and trying to recover. Perhaps this is what makes her story so significant. It's not about the attention or recognition, but the strength it takes to persevere when things go wrong, when the spotlight troubles were brewing fades. Jazz Jennings was on TV throughout her childhood. People all over the world admired her journey from a very early age. She was confident, full of energy, and always happy. Her strength amazed people. She spoke openly about her identity and handled everything gracefully. However, behind her fame, troubles were brewing. When these problems finally surfaced, it wasn't sudden. They came slowly, then all at once. After Jazz had her gender confirmation surgery, she started to distance herself from the public. Her social media presence decreased, and she made fewer public appearances. Fans took notice of these changes, but initially did not know what was going on. When Jazz did reappear, she looked different with a softer face, heavier body, and quieter voice. Her manner of speaking had also changed, and there was a new sadness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Jazz admitted that she had gained more than 100 pounds. It all began as she was recovering from surgery, but it developed into a bigger issue. It wasn't just about her physical healing. She was also dealing with internal struggles. Jazz started binge eating, indulging in multiple pizzas and boxes of donuts in one sitting. She consumed thousands of calories at once, not out of hunger, but as a way to cope with her emotional pain. Food became her way to escape from her problems. She used it to try to make herself feel better. However, the more she ate, the worse she felt. Her body and mind started to change. As a result, she began to experience feelings of depression and anxiety. Everyday activities became difficult for her. Even simple tasks like brushing her teeth or attending therapy sessions felt overwhelming. There were days when getting out of bed seemed like an impossible challenge. Her family always supported her, with her mother Jeanette trying everything to help. However, there were times when even her mother's support did not feel like it was enough. In a particularly emotional moment, viewers witnessed Jeanette pleading with Jazz to stand up for herself. Jeanette's voice cracked with emotion as she desperately wanted her daughter to come back to her. Jazz appeared to be consumed by her pain, sitting quietly and unsure of what to do or say. This was a stark contrast to the confident teenager that Jazz once was. The scenes were authentic and genuine, revealing a new side of Jazz that many had never witnessed before. Previously admired by many, she now struggled to cope with the demands of fame. While fame had granted her a platform, it had also robbed her of inner peace. Though she had become an icon for others, she had yet to truly discover herself. The expectation to always appear strong had become overwhelming. A major event followed when Jazz got accepted into Harvard University, a significant accomplishment that many aspired to achieve. While a major event followed, everyone anticipated her immediate enrollment. Jazz decided to postpone it because she felt she mandated time for personal healing. Many people were shocked by this unexpected choice. Jazz was always seen as invincible. She constantly kept pushing ahead, no matter what obstacles came her way. However, now she was acknowledging that she wasn't doing well. This shattered a powerful misconception. Her life wasn't flawless, and her transition did not fix everything. Despite all the admiration and spotlight, there was a young woman behind the facade who was simply trying to find peace. Jazz's journey began as a tale of courage and optimism. However, over time, it transformed into something more profound. It turned into a narrative about the challenges of maturing in the spotlight. It explored the consequences of being perceived as a role model before fully understanding oneself. It highlighted the difficulty of maintaining strength. Constantly, Jazz demonstrated real bravery by taking a step back. Instead of keeping up appearances, she prioritized her well-being. She decided to focus on healing rather than pretending everything was fine. Jazz did not conceal her challenges. She was open about them. Her actions served as a powerful reminder that it's perfectly fine to not have it all together. Her narrative is no longer solely focused on being a trailblazer or representative figure. Now, it centers around the universal experience of being human. It explores the inner struggle to attain contentment and the belief that even in the toughest moments, there is always a path ahead. Jazz continues to move forward on this path despite the challenges she faces, demonstrating her determination to persevere. The heavy silence behind Smileless. Over time, Jazz Jennings began to undergo a change. Her once lively and bright personality seemed to dim. The energetic smile that used to grace magazines, TV screens, and stages now seemed more gentle and weary. Those who had been following her story from the start started to pick up on these changes, and gradually a question started to emerge. Was everything becoming overwhelming for her at such a young age? Jazz's remarkable journey has been admired for many years. People view her story as something that broke new ground, was incredibly impactful, and very inspiring. She was a young girl when she became a symbol for a cause. Her name became synonymous with advancement, and experts in the field studied her life, wrote about her in educational materials, and talked about her on TV. Her experiences from schools to conferences have drastically influenced the public's perception of gender identity in children. However, despite receiving applause and praise from the world, there was a different story unfolding in the background. Jazz was developing not only in stature, but also emotionally as she became more mature. The expectations placed on her by society to constantly appear happy, the tragedy of Jazz Jennings' resilient, and fulfill a certain image became overwhelming. She was not just a representation or a figurehead, but an individual with emotions, uncertainties, and anxieties. As she shared more about her experiences, others began to see that there was more to her story than just celebration. Her journey also involved feeling overwhelmed and confused with a heavy emotional burden. Some people who originally supported early transitioning started to reconsider their views. They wondered if very young children like 2, 5, or 11-year-olds could truly comprehend the full implications of transitioning, including the emotional and psychological effects. After a bold article was published online in 2023, a difficult question became impossible to ignore. The article was titled "The Tragedy of Jazz Jennings" and did not sugarcoat things. It implied that the adults in Jazz's life, including doctors, parents, and the media, had treated her more as a cause than as a child. The article raised the question of whether anyone had thought about Jazz's feelings before making important decisions for her. The story portrayed a girl who has always been encouraged, but may have wanted someone to double-check her choices. The various systems in her life, such as healthcare, society, and culture, seemed to have driven her forward so quickly that there was no time to pause. She did not have the opportunity to ask tough questions or admit uncertainty about her feelings. During one episode of her TV show, Jazz revealed a personal detail. She seemed motionless and serious. Jazz admitted that she did not experience sexual attraction and was uncertain if she ever would. The moment was powerful and unforgettable. The sincerity couldn't be diluted by music or editing. It was genuine and made viewers ponder deeply. That one moment revealed a side of Jazz that was unfamiliar to many. It wasn't the usual self-assured public speaker or the cheerful teenager. Instead, she appeared as a vulnerable young woman confronting inner struggles. She seemed uncertain not only about what lies ahead, but also about her physical and emotional well-being. It wasn't just about figuring out who she was anymore, but about finding inner peace. Did she truly feel comfortable in her body? Was she genuinely happy? And if not, what was causing her distress? More people started listening, and soon more voices joined in. Stories emerged from those who had transitioned at a young age. Some shared regrets, while others expressed confusion. The focus was not on denying one's identity, but on taking things slowly to allow for natural development. Jazz's story began to symbolize a bigger issue of a system that prioritizes affirmation over listening. Not all children know their desires early on. Many are still exploring their identities and emotions. When a system doesn't leave room for questions and uncertainties, it can harm those it intends to support. For Jazz, the price she paid could have been her inner peace. She received attention, applause, and admiration from the world. However, in exchange, she might have lost the ability to process her emotions at her pace. The world desires a flawless narrative, but in reality, life is not perfect. Life is chaotic, perplexing, and constantly evolving. As Jazz grows and shares her thoughts and beliefs, hopefully she will find peace in being more than just a symbol. Hopefully, she will find happiness in following her path and not worrying about meeting other people's expectations. Jazz should take it one step at a time and not feel pressured to be anyone other than herself. The quiet struggles when the lights fade. Once upon a time, the quiet struggles Jazz Jennings was a well-known public figure shining brightly. She was not just an ordinary teenager, but someone who represented change, hope, and innovation. Her name was heard in schools, meetings, and news stories. She appeared on TV, magazine covers, and at events with a big smile. She exuded confidence, charm, and vitality. To many, particularly those in the LGBTQ+ community, she symbolized potential. Since she was very young, Jazz has been on camera a lot. She starred in her reality show, gave speeches, wrote books, and had fans worldwide. People loved her for being smart, kind, easy to connect with, and resilient. Many people looked up to her for her courage. She was known as the girl who transitioned at a young age and who educated the world about acceptance. She was seen as evidence that transitioning can bring happiness and fulfillment. As Jazz got older, there was a noticeable change in her demeanor. She still had a smile, but there was something off about it. It became harder for her to keep up her strength. The stress she had been carrying for years started to become visible. The once happy and vibrant teenager started to become more withdrawn. She appeared quieter, more exhausted, and less confident. Her previously acclaimed journey began to reveal its flaws. In her early 20s, Jazz began to feel the burden of her weight dragging her down. Her difficulties became more apparent. She talked openly about her depression and admitted to binge eating. She shared the emotional distress she experienced after her surgeries. She no longer appeared as the flawless image that people had imagined her to be. She was simply a young woman trying to navigate life in a world that had placed unrealistic expectations on her. Many triumph and defeat people found it difficult to accept the change in Jazz's situation. Activists who previously supported her now had to figure out how to react. Some chose to continue supporting her, pointing out that her struggles were not her fault, but a result of a society that was still not fully inclusive. They felt that Jazz's hardships highlighted the need for more support for trans individuals. They still saw Jazz as a hero despite her current struggles. However, not everyone understood how to handle the new Jazz music. Some groups that had previously celebrated her story started to distance themselves. Her experiences no longer matched the ideal narrative. Her struggles, transformations, and emotional conflicts made her story more intricate. Many struggled to clarify intricacies in a society that preferred clear-cut distinctions between right and wrong, triumph and defeat. As all of this was happening, politicians and commentators were also taking notice. People with different opinions started using Jazz's struggles to promote their beliefs. They took snippets from her show to argue against medical treatment for transgender youth. They manipulated her story to fit their agenda. They attempted to use her as an example of why transitioning was a mistake, disregarding Jazz's perspective entirely. During all the noise, Jazz stayed silent. The confident girl now looked exhausted. She had been carrying the hopes of many for a long time, and all she wanted now was peace. She no longer wanted to be only a symbol, but to be seen as a person, not just a topic of public discussion. During times of peace and solitude, Jazz let herself experience a range of emotions like confusion, sadness, and frustration without the presence of cameras or microphones. She had been well known since she was a child, never getting the opportunity to mature in private. Every aspect of her life had been documented, observed, and analyzed by others. Her sense of self had shifted to being something that was owned by the public, not just by her. Jazz Jennings was more than a reality star. She was a young girl with a significant responsibility. She had to symbolize a whole movement, be a voice for others, and never show weakness. Despite the attention, she was still a regular person who experienced pain, fear, and a desire for love and peace, just like everyone else. As time behind the smiles of the Jennings family passes and the spotlight dims, people wonder, who is Jazz Jennings when no one is watching? Is she a cheerful TV personality? Is she the girl who secretly cried when no one was looking? Could she be both at the same time? It is evident that Jazz's journey, with all its highs and lows, should be viewed with compassion. Instead of being seen as a flawless narrative or a topic for debate, it should serve as a reminder that there are real individuals behind the headlines. Jazz was never expected to shoulder the weight of the world. Perhaps now she can focus on taking care of herself, behind the smiles of the Jennings family. The Jennings family has been followed by the world for years on television, showcasing their story of togetherness, affection, and unwavering encouragement. They were viewed as a unique model of acceptance. They stood united as a family, showcasing courage and persistence as their transgender daughter, Jazz Jennings, entered the spotlight. Many found them inspiring. Their household appeared to be a secure place overflowing with love, doctor's appointments, filming dates, and press events. Everything seemed perfect. However, what was shown on camera was not the whole story. Small imperfections were always present behind the scenes. They were concealed by smiles, kind words, and edited videos. Jeanette Jennings, Jazz's mother, was the central figure in the family. She was the one who took charge from the start, managing appointments, endorsing treatments, defending decisions online and on TV. She was determined, passionate, and appeared unbeatable. She proudly held the role of protector, doing everything she could to ensure her daughter's success. As Jazz kept moving forward on her journey, it became more difficult. Her feelings got stronger and her body started having a tough time. The stress did not go away. It increased, and with that, Jeanette also started feeling more frustrated. At first, she had been happy during interviews, talking about love and encouragement. But over time, that positivity faded. Her warmth turned into visible tension. In later episodes of I Am Jazz, the mood shifted. Instead of just joyful occasions, viewers witnessed disagreements and suffering. One particular moment was very memorable. Jeanette and Jazz were sitting opposite each other at the kitchen table. Jeanette appeared fatigued, speaking more loudly than usual with sharp and fast words. Jazz sat silently with heavy eyes, lost in thought. She did not argue or respond. This moment was more significant than words could convey. It wasn't a typical disagreement between a mother and daughter. It was a silent storm brewing from years of pressure, expectations, and misunderstandings. There was a larger issue at hand, something that had been developing over time and was now coming to light. Jeanette used to be a source of support, but now people are questioning if her guidance has turned into control. People are wondering if the focus is still on Jazz, or if it has evolved into something bigger that Jazz may not be prepared for. Even those who used to admire Jeanette are starting to have doubts. They're questioning if she is truly listening to her daughter, or if she is more concerned with maintaining a certain public image. The opinions started to become more widespread, and some labeled her as a stage mom, meaning a parent who is overly involved in a situation and can't distance themselves from it, even if it causes harm. Jazz had become a representative for a cause, a figure of bravery and inclusivity. However, being a symbol had its drawbacks. It involved being constantly in the public eye, even during tough times. It meant revealing all details from breakdowns and therapy sessions to confessions to the world. The stress was not only felt by Jazz, but impacted the entire family. Her siblings, who used to be outgoing, became more subdued. They spoke in hushed tones, their concern evident in their eyes. They attempted to remain strong, but the burden was overwhelming. Jazz's father, Greg, used to balance Jeanette's energetic personality with a sense of calm. But now, he appeared distant. He stayed silent and distant, lacking his usual supportive presence. The dynamics in the family were changing, and no one knew what would happen next. The Jennings were once seen as a perfect example of support by people outside of their circle. However, they now appear to be just like everyone else. Regular individuals who find themselves in a situation larger than they had anticipated. Initially, they had entered the public eye with optimism, aiming to assist, motivate, and improve circumstances. Jazz Jennings finding herself again. Jazz Jennings has a profound and heavy story that gives pause for thought. It's not filled with loud drama or stunning twists, but carries a quiet weight that is difficult to shake off. Her life was more than just growing up, as she carried the hopes and expectations of many people before fully understanding the meaning of those expectations. Since the age of 6, Jazz has been viewed as a pioneer. This was not her choice, but others want a young figure like her to represent progress. Jazz was the face of the movement, growing up in the spotlight, addressing important issues on TV, and always smiling despite the pressure. She was expected to be flawless, not just for herself, but for the entire cause. Jazz had to exhibit bravery, cheerfulness, strength, and confidence without showing any doubt. There was no opportunity for her to simply be a child. However, life does a new side of Jazz not always go according to plan. Figuring out who you are takes time and cannot be rushed. You cannot mold your identity based on what others think of you or on public perceptions. Jazz felt pressured to be a role model for others, even though she was still trying to figure out her identity. As Jazz grew older, the challenges she faced became more evident. It became apparent that years of scrutiny had taken a toll on her. Jazz always stayed true to herself and continued to advocate for transgender youth. However, she started to openly discuss the impact of her journey on her inner self. The public had only seen the polished and positive side of her story for a long time. But now a new side of Jazz was emerging. She shared her feelings of emptiness, confusion about her identity, and disconnection from certain parts of herself. Her honesty was not loud, but rather soft and powerful. During one episode of her show, Jazz revealed a side of herself that was seldom seen by others. Speaking softly and calmly, she confessed that she felt lost and unsure of her identity. This simple admission conveyed deep-seated pain that had been hidden for years. It wasn't just about her being transgender. It was about her struggles as a human being. She expressed the difficulty of not being able to grow up without facing constant scrutiny and criticism. Jazz also described the emptiness that follows years of receiving praise and admiration. Jazz's story reminds us of something important that we tend to overlook. We can get so caught up in celebrating success that we forget there is a person behind the achievement. It's easy to see others as symbols or perfect figures, but in reality, they are complex individuals with doubts, emotions, and growth. When Jazz was younger and everything seemed perfect, she received constant praise and was held up as a role model. However, as she faced challenges with her weight, emotions, and self-identity, the support faded, and some people even distanced themselves from her. Her journey no longer fit the tidy narrative that had been constructed. However, this difficult part of her experience, filled with mistakes and emotions, may be the most authentic. This is where real honesty exists. Jazz wasn't falling short. She was simply being human. She was confronting the reality of dealing with choices made in her youth, rebuilding herself from within, and exploring questions that were previously off-limits to her. People like stories that have a clear start and finish. They enjoy seeing before and after pictures and hearing success stories. However, Jazz is not at the end of her journey yet. She is currently in the middle where life is complicated and unclear. Each day brings challenges and small successes for her. Jazz is figuring out who she truly is in a world that has expectations for her. This process requires courage, but not the kind that gets people cheering. In 2024, Jazz is still around, although not as popular as before. She's not in the public eye like she used to be, not on magazine covers or constantly followed by cameras. Instead, she's quietly focusing on improving herself. She shares small updates with her followers about her mental health, weight loss journey, and thoughts about the future. Her posts have changed. They seem gentler, slower, and more personal. The stress is not as intense, and there is more peace and quiet. Jazz is living without a plan for the first time. She is not trying to be perfect, just trying to be herself. She is a young woman with her thoughts, concerns, and aspirations. Jazz is discovering how to break free from the old labels that used to define her.